This video was brought to you by my loyal patrons. Pledge today and receive exclusive perks. Link in the description. Because it sounded like a fun challenge, I decided to take a stab at rewriting what many consider to be the worst Thomas and Friends movie of all time, Misty Island Rescue. I've addressed my three main problems with this movie in the Season 14 retrospective, but just to recap. 1. So much pointless filler. So many scenes occur that introduce information that are either not followed up on, or just exist to fill the runtime. Diesel's subplot early on kicks off the whole movie, and it gets forgotten about. The rescue team is established early on and are also forgotten about. Ol' Wheezy, the Shake Shake Bridge, and Hee-Haw are all given scenes that ultimately amount to nothing. There's a scene that establishes Gordon and Whip will work together to find Thomas, and that is also forgotten about immediately. The movie frequently builds up that the logging locos are going to run out of fuel eventually, but it ultimately doesn't matter because the tunnel caves in and blocks them anyway. They're stuck, whether they had fuel or not, so what was the point? Topham, Gordon, Edward, and James all going to the island itself was pointless filler. All it led to was a reunion scene with Thomas, which easily could have occurred on Sodor. Number 2. Lack of intelligent characters and character arcs. The movie lacks characters that we want to root for. Thomas is the only one in the whole movie who has a major character arc. He does learn a lesson at the end that his decisions are not always right, and he has a goal throughout this movie, that being to get home. But I find Thomas to be a little too much of a prick in this, and somewhat hard to sympathize with. Bash, Dash, and Ferdinand are the other main characters of this thing, and they have no goals. They're just along for the ride pretty much, and lack any motivation to do what they do in this. Diesel has a clear goal, a pretty respectable one at that. He wants a chance to be really useful, but since his subplot gets forgotten about, he's never given a chance to accomplish it. And on top of that, you have characters that are meant to be intelligent, like Sir Topham making boneheaded decisions that only further complicate things. The characters leave a lot to be desired here. And 3, the amount of plot conveniences. There are so many major plot conveniences in this movie that it causes smoke to shoot out of my ears. The biggest, dumbest moment is when Percy sees Misty Island for the first time. You mean to tell me that the mist that has been there keeping the island out of sight has been there for, what, 50 years? And it conveniently lifts for the first time right when the story needs Percy to see the island? And no one has known that the island is there? Not even Topham? The tunnel to Misty Island just so happens to be right next to the new rescue center. Thomas's raft just so happens to align perfectly with a rail dock so Thomas can puff right off onto the island and keep the plot moving. Making stuff happen just so the plot can move forward removes any sense of stakes or realism from the story. It's hard to feel scared for these characters or get invested in their plights when we know that every obstacle they face will just magically be resolved by happenstance. Now, I really cannot stress enough that my goal here with my rewrite is not to make the movie more realistic, per se. That's a part of it, sure, but really what I want to do is fix these major storytelling problems that I have with it, and overall improve the story. Craft a story with all the elements that the movie presents, in which all setups have payoffs, stakes feel real, and you actually give a damn about these characters' plights. I don't think there is a way to make this movie flawless. I think it's just too far out there of a premise to work in this universe. But I think most of us would be willing to overlook some of the holes in realism as long as the story is good. Or at the very least, entertaining. I don't really care how unrealistic it is that Thomas gets lost at sea, or that there's an underwater tunnel between islands, as long as I give a damn about what's happening with these characters. There is a fine line to be ridden here. Okay, now that that's all out of the way, let's begin. The movie opens similarly to how the actual one does. A rescue center is being built on Sodor. The pack is hard at work with the construction. Thomas and Percy bring Jack and Alfie there, and they all stand in awe of the sight when they arrive, seeing it for the first time. They all watch as Harold lands, returning from rescuing a climber. So Topham explains the logistics of the center to them, as he does in the actual movie. But he is frustrated, because work is taking longer than anticipated. The Vickerstown Bridge is closed for repairs, and so wood from the mainland has to be sent to Sodor by ship. Some days later, the ship with the wood finally arrives at Brendam Docks. A friendly tugboat, a new character, brings the ship in and greets the engines on the dockside. For the sake of visuals, we'll just use good old Warrior here. While the logs are all unloaded, Diesel arrives at the docks and asks what's happening. Thomas explains that the logs are being loaded onto a long train for a strong engine like Henry to come collect. Diesel wants to be useful and suggests that he can take it, but Thomas rather arrogantly teases him and puts him down. You, Diesel? You want to be really useful? That's a first for you. Now, he's not necessarily wrong, considering Diesel's history. It's a remark based on what we know about Diesel himself as a character, not about him being a Diesel. Thomas's snarkiness is unwarranted, though, and this is our first glimpse at what his arc in this movie will be, and the overall moral of the story. Everyone can be useful in their own way, even if it's not apparent at first. In simpler terms, don't judge a book by its cover. Salty finishes shunting the loaded log cars into a long train for Henry to come collect later. Diesel returns and is more determined to prove himself than ever after Thomas's remarks. When no one is looking, he attempts to take the logs himself, but he does not account for how heavy they are. After much grunting and heaving, he manages to get the train moving. Diesel chooses to take a shortcut along the new line to the rescue center, though he is unaware of an unfinished bridge. Thomas spots him and chases after him to warn him. When they approach the bridge, Diesel sees it and tries to stop, but the log train's sheer weight drags him forward. The train plummets over the bridge's edge as Diesel desperately tries to slow it down enough to save himself. Thomas saves Diesel just in time as the last flatbed goes over the edge. Diesel is very grateful, though of course, he'd never say it. Diesel lost the entire train though, and this is a big problem of course because logs are hard to ship in right now. That night the engines congratulate Thomas on his rescue. Topham explains that he has put in another order of wood from the mainland. He was going to send for a mainland engine to bring it over when the Vickerstown Bridge reopened, but as a reward for his bravery, he allows Thomas to go collect it. As Vickerstown Bridge is still under repair, Thomas will go there by ship, but Topham says that the bridge work should be finished by the time he returns. Thomas is excited by this, as he's never been on a ship before. A few weeks later, some engines gather at the docks while Thomas awaits to board the ship. While they wait, Thomas wonders what places he'll see on his journey, and he asks Salty what lands are near Sodor. Salty mentions many nearby places that ships pass by on their travels, including a nearby island called Misty Island. Thomas and Percy raise an eyebrow. They've never heard of it before. Edward mentions that he's heard stories about Misty Island from back in the day, though he admits that he's not sure if it's actually real or not. Salty, of course, sees this as a chance to tell a story, and he talks about how when the mist is down, mysterious engines wander the island's abandoned rails. Thomas chuckles at the story. He clearly doesn't believe it. Dusk falls. By now, all the engines have gone, but Percy and Thomas still wait. The ship is full, and Thomas is told to wait for the next one in the morning. Thomas, eager to start his adventure, doesn't want to wait. He spots the friendly tug near the dockside and calls out to him. He asks if he'd be willing to tow him to the mainland on a barge. The tug is hesitant at first, but he agrees. The mainland isn't that far, after all. An excited Thomas is lowered onto the barge and chained down. By now, it is dark. Percy stays and watches as Thomas and the tug set off into the night. The sea rocking makes Thomas sleepy. While he is asleep, rough waves cause the tug's rope to come undone, and no one aboard notices until it's too late. Thomas and the barge drift off into the sea mist. The tug's crew do finally notice the broken rope. They call out to Thomas. The tug sounds its whistle frantically, but the mist is too thick. Thomas is nowhere to be seen. The tug frantically searches the open water all night as the camera slowly zooms out into the fog, and it fades to black. Thomas doesn't realize he's even broken away until he wakes up in the morning daylight, run aground on a foggy shore somewhere. In a panic, Thomas attempts to whistle for help, but he has no steam. No one comes for a long time. All Thomas can do is wait. But eventually, the mist starts to lift, and Thomas makes out an engine passing by with a train on a nearby coastal track. We don't get a good look at it, and Thomas shouts to get his attention. The engine stops. Thomas gasps. It hurt him. And then, the engine appears to run away scared. Thomas begins to lose hope. At the same time, back on Sodor, Topham is awoken in bed by his telephone ringing. He is given the sad news. His crestfallen reaction tells all. Thomas awakes again in a fright to chains being attached to him. Fortunately for him, the engine returned with two smaller ones and a big crane. The two smaller engines have winches on their rear ends, and together they haul Thomas off the barge to a closer spot on the shore for the crane to pick him up. Thomas has never seen engines with such strained attachments like that before, and he stares in surprise as the crane lifts him onto their rails. Thomas explains that he thought he had scared off the bigger engine earlier, but one of the smaller ones, Bash, explains that he only ran off to get help, and he and Dash came along to see him with their own eyes. It's not often that an engine washes up on Misty Island. Thomas is shocked at this reveal. Misty Island is real? Salty told us this place was only a legend. Nope, it's real, the locals reply. Always has been. The three introduce themselves as the Logging Locos, Bash, Dash, and Ferdinand. Bash and Dash are bouncy twins that finish each other's sentences, while Ferdinand is sort of a silent strongman, the muscle of the group that doesn't talk much. And when he does, it's usually rather meaningful, but he does chuckle at the twins' wit. It's clear that these three have a few screws loose, but they mean well. Thomas is a bit put off by their ways, and he isn't quite sure what to make of them just yet. He stares at their weird attachments like their winches and their giant balloon stacks, and he remembers what Salty said about mysterious engines. To him, Bash, Dash, and Ferdinand just seem strange and otherworldly. Thomas explains his situation as the Logging Locos tow him back to their depot to get his fire lit again. On their journey back, we get this wonderful sequence of them all traveling through Misty Island. And we, the audience, get to take in this mysterious brand new location with Thomas. The music swells as through the mist burning off in the morning sunlight, Thomas sees things like a giant waterfall, white rushing rivers, and trees over 100 feet tall. Misty Island is very unlike Sodor, and is quite breathtaking. His awe is rudely interrupted when the trio tows him across a rickety old wooden trestle bridge. The bridge sways slightly as they cross, and to Thomas, it looks unsafe. They make it across with no issue. Thomas is rather shaken. The Logging Locos take notice and have a tease. What's the matter, city boy? A little wobbling too much for you? Thomas frowns. While he thinks Misty Island is rather beautiful, his initial suspicions seem confirmed. This place, and the Logging Locos, just seem crazy. Back at Brendam Docks, Topham investigates what happened with the tug and his crew. Upon hearing the news, Salty says,
"Our poor old Thomas. He's in Poseidon's hands now."
Even Cranky is saddened by the news. Topham later breaks the news to the engines. The engines gasp. Percy is disheartened, as is Diesel, who overhears from a corner of the yard. A search ensues, and the rescue team are put on their first major task. Harold takes to the sky as Topham heads out to sea with Captain. The logging locos show Thomas their depot at the logging camp. Thomas is aghast at the abundance of logs everywhere. Just what the Fat Controller needs back home. The logging locos burst out laughing at the name. Who's the Fat Controller? He sounds funny. And Thomas explains. I like that scene in the actual movie, so I'm keeping it here. Once he has steam built up, the locos show Thomas around. They explain that they run a small logging railway and transport logs from the logging camp to their docks. This is paired alongside a black and white flashback sequence, showing the railway in its heyday back when they were busy. Bash and Dash sort the flat cars to be loaded with logs, while Ferdinand hauls the heavy trains to the docks. There used to be more engines, but they all went over time, and the three of them are all that's left. The logging railway still operates, but it's not at all like how it used to be. It's all very run down now, and hardly anything works anymore. Of all their log loading rigs, only one still works, which they affectionately call Hee-Haw. It's obvious by their expressions that the logging locos wish they could somehow return to their glory days when they had more work, but they still love their dilapidated home nonetheless. Thomas isn't very impressed by their crappy equipment, and compares it to what they have back on Sodor, such as Hee-Haw to Cranky. The logging locos appear offended, but say nothing. Thomas asks them how he can get back to Sodor. They mentioned docks before, so he asks about a ship. The locos tell them that their docks are small and not large enough for big ships that can carry engines. Ferdinand says there is another way, and he brings up an old abandoned tunnel to Sodor, but it hasn't been used for decades, as its entrance caved in years ago. Thomas goes and examines the tunnel for himself, and realizes the job is too big for them. Bash and Dash suggests maybe Ol Weezy can clear it. In my version of the story, Ol Weezy is not a crane, but an old steam shovel. Thomas meets Ol Weezy, and again is not impressed with what he sees. The steam shovel is dilapidated, and looks like it'll fall apart at any minute. Interestingly, Nitrogen actually built a Misty Island steam shovel model, though I don't think it ever featured prominently on screen. They attempt to steam Ol Weezy, and to the locos' delight and Thomas's shock, Ol Weezy fires into life. Bash and Dash smirk smugly at Thomas in a told you so sort of way. Thomas realizes that he may have been wrong to so quickly judge, but he doesn't admit it. They set Ol Weezy to work, and it proves capable, but it'll be a long time before the tunnel is cleared. Back on Sodor, the search continues. Harold searches the seas from the air, while Topham, aboard Captain, surveys coves and beaches along Sodor's coast, but they find no sign of Thomas. Percy manages Annie and Clarabelle while Thomas is away. He is upset, of course, and the two try to console him. He comes across Diesel looking rather sad. Percy makes a comment to him and expects a typical snarky Diesel response, but Diesel says nothing. It's clear that he feels guilty about all this. Thomas only sailed off to the mainland for saving him, after all. Meanwhile, back on Misty Island, a montage occurs of the engines and Ol Weezy working hard to clear the tunnel. It's a long job, and days go by. Thomas continues to make unintentionally rude remarks about Ol Weezy and the railway's infrastructure. We have a construction crew back on Sodor. If they were here, this would have been cleared in a day, he says, much to the logging locos' offense. It's made apparent by their facial expressions that they're slowly beginning to resent Thomas. Ol Weezy finally completes the clearing, and the tunnel portal is finally open. Thomas shunts together a long train of logs to take back to Sodor with him, but he finds that he can't haul them all on his own, so he insists that the locos come with him. The logging locos resist, and finally confront Thomas.
Why should we go with you? You don't care about us. We've been helping you this entire time, and you've only put down our island since you got here.
Thomas, thinking on the spot, tells them to help him because the Fat Controller will make them all like new again. He'll be so happy with them that he'll restore all their equipment. A potential return to their glory days. The offer is tempting. The three locos discuss among themselves. Ferdinand speaks up and says he doesn't have a good feeling about it, but they ultimately agree. The cavalcade arranges the long train and begin their descent into the forlorn tunnel. Their journey into the dark unknown begins. While in the tunnel, they come across more blockage. The logging locos, already beginning to regret their decision, suggest they all go back and get Ol Weezy, but Thomas is fired up at this point and tired of waiting. He shouts at them to help him ram it, but the locos resist, so Thomas in all his rage shouts, "Fine, I don't need you," and rams the blockage on his own. Only chaos ensues, as Thomas gets himself stuck in the blockage. The crash causes rubble to fall and blocks them all in. The engines are all trapped, and no one knows they're there. Thomas has now reached his lowest point in the story. He realizes this is all his doing, and he brought the poor logging locos down with him. All hope of getting home now seems lost. The tunnel goes silent. Time passes, and finally, Bash breaks the silence.
Thomas, are you okay?
He asks. No, replies Thomas. I'm not. I caused this mess. It was my bad decisions that got us all stuck here. I deserve this, but you all don't. I'm so sorry. The locos say nothing. Before they can reply, rocks continue to shift, and suddenly a hole opens in the tunnel roof above Thomas. The logging locos have an idea. Send a smoke signal. Loggers would use smoke signals back in the day when they needed help on the mountain. Thomas does so repeatedly. Time and time again he tries, to no avail. But he doesn't give up. Harold, out at sea, finally spots the smoke signals in the distance and flies towards them. Through the mist, he sees land. He flies closer and spots Thomas's barge on the shoreline. Thomas is on Misty Island! An excited Harold darts back to Sodor at once and alerts Topham at Knepford. Thomas is on Misty Island! He shouts from above. Everyone below gasps. Misty Island? Exclaims Percy. Edward chuckles. Well, I'll be. So it is real. Topham remembers the old Misty Island tunnel. There's a tunnel? Percy asks, and Topham quickly explains that back in the day, long before the Northwestern Railway formed, Sodor would get wood from Misty Island, but the tunnel caved in, and the logging railway presumably shut down. He drops everything at once and asks Percy to take him to it. Diesel, while shunting in the yard, overhears everything, and follows them when no one's looking. The tunnel's portal is along an abandoned branch line, with rails that have rusted over. Topham and Percy survey it with caution. Just to give you all an idea of how I'm picturing this geographically, I'm picturing Misty Island being south of Sodor, kinda like this, out of view of most railway lines, hence why no engine has ever seen it, with the tunnel connecting the islands around here or so. It's also along the route that Thomas and the tug would have taken to the mainland. Thomas would have been lost around here somewhere, and washed up on the island shore. Now this is all very technical, and it doesn't need to be addressed in the movie itself, but that's just how I'm picturing it in my mind. Topham decides to send an engine down the tunnel to reach Thomas. Percy wants to go, but he's too scared of the dark tunnel. A voice from behind them shouts, "I'll go. Send me." Topham and Percy gasp. It's Diesel. I'm removing Whiff entirely from this movie. I feel this story just doesn't really need him. Through Diesel's bravery, Percy finds his own courage and asks if he can go with him. Topham is surprised by this, but agrees. He boards Harold and flies to the source of the smoke signals. Together, Diesel and Percy begin their descent, with Diesel leading the way. They reach the blockage. Percy shouts out to Thomas and confirms that help is on the way. Thomas and the logging locos sigh in relief. Diesel and Percy can't clear the blockage on their own, but Percy knows exactly who can. They head back and fetch Jack and Alfie from the rescue center site. Jack and Alfie clear the blockage at once, and finally they reach through to Thomas on the other side. Thomas is utterly flabbergasted to see Diesel there.
Diesel? You came here to save me? You saved me, I saved you. Now we're even. But don't think this changes anything.
Thomas is in disbelief and is humbled. Diesel had proved himself really useful after all, fully rounding out that arc of Thomas being too quick to judge him at the beginning. Meanwhile, Topham and Harold spot the tunnel portal on Misty Island. From the skies, Topham sees the old logging railway and is taken aback by it. He had no idea that Misty Island still had an operating railway. The big cavalcade makes their long journey back to Sodor. Harold lands at the Sodor portal as they all enter daylight again. Topham is relieved to see Thomas. He's so happy that he throws his hat into the air, and he's overjoyed by the discovery of logs. Thomas introduces him to the logging locos. The locos look at Topham and chuckle.
So you're the Fat Controller. You really let your engines call you that?
Thomas hushes them mid-sentence. Topham raises an eyebrow, and Thomas quickly explains how they helped him. He's very grateful to have met them, and he says that he was wrong for being so judgmental. They chuckle in response in their silly way. All is forgiven. Topham is so happy with Misty Island's rediscovery that he reopens the tunnel and the branch with it. As Thomas promised the locos, restoration of their dilapidated logging railway begins. A happy montage occurs. The logging railway is shown in full swing again as engines collect logs to bring to Sodor. Rocky, Jack, Alfie, and the pack continue to build the rescue center, and we see Captain and the friendly tug working together to pull Thomas's grounded barge off the shoreline. Harold watches from above approvingly. Sodor now has its own resource of wood, which is transported to Sodor by the logging locos. The logging locos are proud to be really useful again. A grand return to their glory days, just like they've always wanted. And there you go. They all celebrate at the end when the rescue center opens, and they all laugh and cheer and whatever. And then Diesel 10 shows up and everyone dies. The end. Now, I know my rewrite is not perfect. Does it make total sense for a forgotten logging railway to exist on an island so close to Sodor? Is an underwater tunnel built in the 19th century at all realistic? No, certainly not. But like I said before, my goal here was more to improve the story and the characters over anything. Now, I really didn't change that much in the grand scheme of things to make this story work. It's still pretty much the same structure, overall the same story, and still pretty unrealistic, just with some elements switched around. Instead of Whiff, it's Diesel, and his ultimate goal of wanting to be useful now has a payoff. Instead of Topham and the engines ridiculously going to the island on a boat, they now logically use the tunnel and Harold. Instead of Percy seeing the smoke signals from Sodor, it's Harold out at sea. The logging locos have a goal that they want to achieve, which serves as their motivation to help Thomas. Ol Weezy makes sense now, and is more crucial to the plot. So tell me, did you like my rewrite? Do you agree with it? Or are there other things that you'd move around or change? Tell me what you all think below. This pick of the week has absolutely nothing to do with Misty Island or CGI Thomas. It's a nice fan story that I'd like to share. It's called Getting Nowhere Quickly by Percy 6 Miles. This video is what I'd describe as a vibe. A very quiet story about Trevor the Traction Engine showing his life on Sodor, and cleverly drawing a parallel between him and Peter Sam of all characters. It's well written, and it's well shot. all with models. Go give it a watch. And I am done. I am so done with Misty Island Rescue. I have thought more about Misty Island and the logging locos this past month than I have in my entire life, and I think I can safely say that I will likely never watch this movie again. That is, unless I make another video where it's relevant, but I don't really see that happening. Audrey Extravaganza 5 at the Tallyclin Railway is right around the corner, and they are once again hosting their popular Just Like Audrey Diorama Challenge. This challenge encourages you to build a model diorama recreating one of the illustrations from the Railway series books, using anything you like. It just has to be physical. As this will be the last Audrey Extravaganza for a while, the Tallyclin hopes to get as many participants as possible for this. So if you're interested, consider entering. Anyone can enter, no matter where in the world you are. Details are outlined in the video linked below. I wish I had more of an update on stuff for you guys, but not a lot has happened since the last video, since it was only a week ago. I'm thinking the next video will be covering the pilot in full finally. I really want to sit down and analyze this in video form. I'm thinking of doing a everything explained type of thing with it, like I did for Magic Rewrote a while back, but we shall see. If that interests you, let me know below. And I suppose I'll leave on that note. Big thanks to all my patrons once again for the continued support. A lot of new faces have joined recently, and I just want to let you all know that I appreciate all of you. See you all in the next one, folks. Bye-bye.